make the best case scenario for your situation. I didn't care what my opponents were going to do. I still don't. I don't care that they train at the best places in the world. They have the best nutritionists, the best sponsors. They have the money, whatever it may be. That doesn't really equate into how I prepare necessarily. It's just that making the best case scenario for my situation, not making any excuses, not cutting any corners. That's what's important for me, because I may not have the same cards dealt that other people have that luxury of training full time or training in the best environments. I may not have that, but I damn sure I'm going to make the best case scenario for whatever cards I am dealt.
Welcome to the Veteran-Led Podcast, where we talk with leaders who use their military experiences to develop great organizations and continue to serve their communities. Today, we have the United States Army's first and only UFC fighter. Colton Smith continues to serve active duty infantry while pursuing his UFC career. Welcome to Veteran-Led, Colton.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's such an honor. When I think back to the great athletes who are also veterans, I think of the Ted Williams from World War II, Rocky Blyer after Vietnam, and here you served in Iraq, Afghanistan, EIB, CIB. So for those and other services, expert infantryman's badge, combat infantryman's badge, Ranger Tab, Sapper Tab, Airborne, Air Assault, deployments, multiple deployments, a leader, and a UFC fighter. So let's get to, how did you convince the Army to let you stay active duty and fight UFC?
I will say, and I like to lead with this, just so there's any preconceived notions. I received no preferential treatment from the military, from the Army. In fact, because mixed martial arts is not an Olympic sport, there is no world-class athlete program. There is no feeder program with the all-Army style club or group that leads you into mixed martial arts and allows you to do that for your full-time job. So the entirety of my professional fighting career, I've also been a professional infantryman, if you will, a professional warfighter. So juggling all of that, it was quickly apparent to me that if I wanted to do both professions, I was going to have to take every single ounce of free time that I have and dedicate that to that extracurricular, which was mixed martial arts, my UFC dream, if you will, while still active duty. So I took personal leave for it, took 54 days of personal leave for the Ultimate Fighter television show. Luckily, I had some general officers and some higher up enlisted leaders who believed in me and allowed me and afforded me that opportunity to take personal leave and go and challenge the best fighters in the world on the Ultimate Fighter.
And that's an amazing accomplishment. And when I think about, as a senior leader, why would I want this to happen? I would think from a recruiting perspective, this is who we want. We want the scrappy individuals who are going out and doing things, especially when we hear that today's Army is having difficulty recruiting physically fit members into the armed forces. You know, these 18-year-old kids, they're not fit anymore. But now but if we can find where they are and go there and show that we support this type of activity, then it's more likely that they're going to come join our organization, or at least they'll know about it. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And the other thing that you didn't get into yet, which I think is really important, is you're also giving back to the military in that you are a special operations combatives instructor and a combatives master trainer, and you continue to train the force on hand-to-hand combat. And I've been out so long, what do they call hand-to-hand combat? It's still the same?
Combatives. Yes.
Combatives,
that's correct.
And so you were crowned the Ultimate Fighter season 16 for that TV reality show. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I took, again, 54 days of leave for the filming of the show. And if I would have racked and stacked myself 1 to 32 before the show started, if I was being honest, an honest steward here, I would have said I was probably number 30 on the show, ranked number 30 out of 32. You got to think about this. At that time, especially, this was 32 of the top welterweights in the world that were unsigned by any other organization that were vying for their spot in the UFC. Of the 32, majority of them, their full-time job was fighting, right? There was a handful of us that had other professions on the show. But generally speaking, and conventional wisdom would tell you, it's very difficult to be a professional athlete, the highest level, and have a full-time job outside of that, and that be like your part-time gig as a professional fighter. So, again, being an honest steward, I'd probably say I was number 30 out of 32 if I was leading myself into the house. However, as time went on, it was readily apparent to me inside of that house. And again, this house is a mansion in Vegas. And yes, you have no outside any contact with the outside world. You can't write letters. You can't make phone calls. You can't get on the internet. You can't do anything. You can read a Bible, and that's it. Nor you could drink and party in the house. Obviously, I did not partake in that. And then you train to fight in this tournament, and you're living with these guys that you're fighting with. And it was readily apparent to me quickly that majority of these individuals, although they're warriors, they're modern day gladiators, if you will, they had never been in a situation where they were away from their families, away from their loved ones, away from their cell phones, away from their gyms, their training partners, whatever nutrition and rhythm and just schedule they had day to day. And I realized, wow, I can win this thing, based on my military experience, based on, I guess, the shared suffering that I've had as an infantryman up to that point in my career. Because at that point, I'd already been on deployments and, unfortunately lost guys and gals in battle and or down range. And I think having that experience is why I won the Ultimate Fighter, bottom line. And it was also the first time in my career where I could really focus on fighting, where I wasn't, a full-time soldier, a leader at the time, probably a squad leader around that time, and was able to focus solely on fighting. So selfishly, this is the first time in my career where I was able to just focus solely on that. And that's why I think I was successful. And that's why I watched these elite athletes, these grown men that were lauded as the best and the brightest in the fight game at the time. I watched them break mentally and eventually break physically in the cage when I would go against them. And as the time progressed in the show, my confidence rose and I realized, hey, I can do this. I can win the Ultimate Fighter. Fast forward, the filming was over after, the 54 days, whatever it was for the filming. And then I left and went back to my duty station. And that's when the fun really began, because the general officer that was in charge at the time, I believe it was General Milley, was the 3 Corps commander at the time. And everyone expected me to get out of the military. They're like, so, we're going to lose you, huh? And I'm like, I think I'm going to re-enlist, And they're like, wait a second, can he do this? Can he, re-enlist in the military and fight? And JAG wasn't really sure. It was unheard of. No one's ever done it before. And fast forward 8 weeks, I win the Ultimate Fighter. So not only did I, make it to the finale, top 2, but I ended up winning. I ended up beating my Canadian counterpart on the show, and pretty handedly. And I also had a veteran in my corner, Tim Kennedy, Green Beret, UFC fighter, serial entrepreneur, amazing human being. He was in my corner for that fight. So it made it that much more special having a brother in arms in the corner and then winning the show. And then at that point, the Army's really like, wow, what are we going to do with this guy? And to be frank, I'm not sure that the Army knew what to do at the time, because they never had anybody like that while still serving on active duty. Usually some National Guardsmen and reservists that have done something similar. But I'm not sure if they knew how to utilize me. And I still had and still have things within the military that I want to accomplish. So I still was trying to strive for the next rank, for the next school, lead my soldiers, while still, fighting competitively.
So what are those goals? Do you want to be a command sergeant major, or what's the final military goal?
I won't speak on that part. But I do have a lot of goals and ambitions in regards to the soldiers, Marines, and sailors that I lead and that I work with day in, day out. So I'm in a joint assignment, and I have individuals from every service that I work with day in and day out. Some of the best NCOs, petty officers, and officers that I've been blessed to serve with in my 18-year career. And I think a lot of what motivates me now is getting them to their goals. And it may not be their goals in uniform, maybe their goals outside of uniform. If I can leave the service after however many years I do, whether it's 20 or it's 30, if I can leave service knowing that I made a true impact on those within my span of influence, whether they're my subordinates, my peers, or my leaders, then I was successful. And, it took me a long time in uniform to understand what impact I wanted to leave, whether it's on an organization that I work for or in service wearing the uniform. And I think that's what I want to be remembered as a leader who took care of his people at all costs and to set them up for success in life in and out of uniform.
Wow. Well, we've taken you to the end of your military career, but let's go back to before your military career. You grow up as a wrestler in Iowa. You get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a black belt in combatives. How do you do this before you join the military, or is this part of your military journey where you start to begin to develop these skills?
So I grew up wrestling in Iowa, born and raised in Iowa, and it's not a whole lot in Iowa. You got wrestling, cornfields, and bush light, so basically everyone wrestles. And I grew up in a culture where we wrestle. I knew that was when wrestling season was around, that's a priority above all else. So that's kind of how I was raised from very young age, 4 years old, all the way up through. And there's an expectation after that to probably wrestle in college as well, and just keep fighting for the dream of wrestling and trying to find what that end state would be, whether that's, NCAA champion or, the Olympic run, whatever wrestlers in the Midwest. That's kind of where your life leads is those goals of being an All-American or maybe represent our country on the international level. That's when I found out you could wrestle in the Army. And that's kind of what my first plan was, to wrestle in the Army, go into the Army, wrestle. Well, it was the height of the war in Iraq. It was right before the surge when I joined. I joined in 2005. The surge started in 2006. And I joined the infantry in 2005. And in that moment, I realized how much I enjoyed being around like-minded individuals that all had a shared goal and understanding on a team. And I realized the same thing that drew me to wrestling on the team aspect of wrestling and in the singular aspect of wrestling of you're by yourself out there on the mat. It was the same thing that drew me to being an infantryman, and how I realized how much that was my calling. That's where I wanted to be in life, was an infantryman. And I found myself, I didn't even try out for the Army wrestling team. I never went. I went out there and trained with those guys and gals out in Colorado Springs at WCAP. I never tried out for the team or anything. I just enjoyed being an infantryman too much. And that kind of led me to fighting, to be honest with you. I was deployed to Western Baghdad, and I got some local DVDs, or local market. I got some DVDs, some bootleg DVDs, and UFC 1 to 43 on my portable DVD player. I watched those in between patrols and in between shifts and everything else we had going on in that crazy time during the surge. And I was like, you know what? I can do this, And I remember I told my platoon, hey, I'm going to be in UFC 150, you watch. And at that point, DVD 1 to 43, we were probably on UFC 50, maybe at the time, and back in America. And I told them, I'm going to be in UFC 150, you watch. They looked like I'm crazy, because they should have. I'm some random private saying I'm going to be in UFC. I've never fought competitively. I fought growing up. I was kind of misfit youth, got in some trouble growing up. I always found myself in little scraps, and then wrestling and everything else. Well, 7 days after that deployment, I found myself in a cage when I was on post-deployment leave. And I fought for an organization in Winchester, Virginia. And luckily I ended up winning. Now, that was the first fight of the night. I won. If I wouldn't have won that fight, I don't know if I'd be, I wouldn't have fought in UFC. I wouldn't have been here today. Luckily, I got the W that day. But honestly, I realized how much I didn't know about fighting at that point. And then from that point, I was hooked. So every waking moment that I had, whether it was at lunchtime, before work, after duty, I would find a place to train, or find someone to train with. So I say that to say I would like to think that I made the best case scenario for my situation while deployed, and chased my dreams and truly believed it. And that prophecy of UFC 150 that I said, my Ultimate Fighter season was probably around UFC 155. So honestly, I wasn't too far off.
Wow. Well, setting that goal and achieving it. Amazing. So I remember the first time I had heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was a young lieutenant. We were at JRTC in Fort Polk. Don't know if you've been there, but we were training to go to Bosnia in 1999. And there was this kid. He was probably 19 years old. His name was Castro. He was probably 160 pounds. He was in my platoon. Now, I was a former college football player, about 220 pounds. I was in great shape. I mean, I still maxed the APFD. I was still, running sub 12 2-minute miles, could do the push-ups, the sit-ups. So I think I'm just, a physical specimen. And this is a skinny little kid. And we go in there and then someone said, well, he trained in a monastery in Brazil or somewhere for, a year. Like, this kid knows what he's doing. So I'm like, I'll take him on, because the platoon leader, right? Everybody looks at the lieutenant like, okay, the lieutenant needs to prove himself. So I show up and and there's a big mat. And it's like, okay, we're going to grapple. And I had never even heard of an arm bar before. But within 1 minute, I was on my back in an arm bar, tapping out. And this kid, he was amazing. He was a great soldier, but a great fighter. And it was just, it's tough to take a beating in front of the whole platoon, but it's great. It's great morale boost for the team when hey, we're infantry guys, we're here to fight, and we want to get better. And you know what? It's a meritocracy out there on the mat. The best fighter wins. And look, I wrestled in middle school. For football, I wanted to gain weight, not lose weight. So I didn't wrestle in high school, but I remember how long, those periods can be, whether 2 minutes, 3 minutes. That training is intense. And, for those that don't get the experience, how do you train for that?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. Definitely difficult, whether it's jujitsu or it's mixed martial arts. I mean, it's hard to explain it. It's really hard to train for it in terms of, trying to find like HIT training, high intensity interval training to try to replicate a fight, to try to replicate a grappling match. And I'm kind of old school in the sense that, how do you get better at jujitsu? You do jujitsu. How do you get better at fighting? You fight, and then I still feel that way. I've gotten a little more scientific with my approach, how I feel myself, how I take care of my body. But I still am of the mind that, how do you get better push-ups? You do push-ups, so I've always kind of kept that keep it simple, stupid, the KISS acronym, if you will, keeping that mindset in everything I do. Don't overthink it. Don't, try to simplify it if you can. And I feel like you'll be a lot more successful. And I carry that approach in every aspect of life. Hard work pays off. Take care of yourself, take care of those around you, stay physically, mentally, emotionally strong in everything you do, and you'll be successful. So to prepare for, the 5-minute rounds, the maybe 3 5s or 5 5-minute rounds, man, I just do it. I fight, fight day in and day out at my gyms, at work, when I get off duty. So that's kind of a broad way to answer that question. But no matter what your profession is, no matter what fuels you, I don't care if it's video gaming or if it's tennis, whatever it may be, how do you get better at it? You do that subject.
Do the work. And to be fair, we really haven't even gotten into your accomplishments yet. I mean, you're a 4-time UFC veteran, 2024 IBJJ PANS Championship medalist, silver medal, National Wrestling Hall of Fame, Outstanding American inductee, Arnold Schwarzenegger Out of the Ring Award winner, and the list goes on. And I like that, the Arnold Schwarzenegger Award, because I remember when I was 16 years old and I was training to play football. My dream was to play football in college. So I was trying to figure out how I was going to get bigger. And I read about how Arnold talked about when he was in the Austrian army, that he would get up in the morning and work out and then do a full day's work. And I think then he said, get up, then work out at the end of the day. But he said he was exhausted, but he continued to train hard during that active duty period. And he felt like he made significant gains then, at a time when a lot of us might say, well, hey, we're out in the field. We're calling it, we're good. So what do you do when you're out in the field? Do you find a way to train?
There was a lot of times, especially as a young, fire team leader, young infantry squad leader, where we would be out in the field. We were out there for a couple weeks at a time, whatever it may be, or NTC for 45 days or whatever different mission sets we were doing, supporting other agencies and stuff like that. And I remember, and a lot of people talk about it still to this day, I remember when you grapple people, over by the ammo shed, or and I would pummel with people. I would wrestle with people. Anybody that wanted to wrestle or grapple with me, I would grapple with them. I'd bring mitts and gloves out to the field. So literally as a live fire range is going on, as my platoon or squad's coming off, I'm hitting mitts, next to the tree line. And I truly think, and I get it, conventional wisdom would tell you, you can't be successful in a sport or an extracurricular if you don't solely focus on that at the highest levels. But for me, it's always been make the best case scenario for your situation. I didn't care what my opponents were going to do. I still don't. I don't care that they train at the best places in the world. They have the best nutritionists, the best sponsors. They have the money, whatever it may be. That doesn't really equate into how I prepare necessarily. It's just that making the best case scenario for my situation, not making any excuses, not cutting any corners. That's what's important for me, because I may not have the same cards dealt that other people have that luxury of training full time or training in the best environments. I may not have that, but I damn sure I'm going to make the best case scenario for whatever cards I am dealt during a fight camp or during a train up camp for, jiu-jitsu tournament or whatever it may be. And then also taking that knowledge and, bringing that down to the next generation of fighters and grapplers.
Well, let's face it, this is the ideal hip pocket training, right? You're in the field, you always have downtime in the field, and everybody that watches war movies assumes that it's all action. There's always a lot of downtime during deployments. There's downtime in the field, but to be able to give that hip pocket training to your soldiers, to get them actively engaged and learning something, because I always believe that the brilliance of the NCO Corps was that they understood there was never enough time to train, and they didn't care about the commander's training schedule as much as I need these soldiers to be combat ready. So Captain Barry, that's great. You got a training schedule here. We will follow that, but there's some other skills we got to train on, and we will train in between. And this is called hip pocket training. This is how we're going to do it. And I really respected that. And it seemed like, the hip pocket training where you're teaching somebody about how to identify terrain features on the map is less engaging than having every soldier say, grab a buddy. All right, we're going to practice. We're going to practice combatives right now. And here's the first thing I'm going to teach you, and walk them through and let them do it, right? Because wasn't it Bruce Lee who said, you don't do it till you do it right. You do it till you can't do it wrong.
That's right.
So when you're out there, obviously you've been a first sergeant, so you've been in a position where you have to have that, you have that downtime, and you have that opportunity. How do you decide what is the hip pocket training we should do? Do you mostly make it combatives, or do you do other military skills?
I am partial to combatives, and I do believe combatives is very underutilized across all branches. And again, I don't care what your occupational specialty is. Combatives, when I think of a hand-to-hand engagement, I think of that being the most intimate form of fighting, of war that you can engage in. When you take away all of our tools, our weapons, all the cool gadgets we have nowadays, what are we left with? Hands, and hands kill. And that's something that I am anytime I have the opportunity to get a platform like this, to speak about how important combatives is to our force. And, there's obvious, also physically, mentally, emotionally, makes you stronger, makes you more, confident, competent as a leader, as a soldier. And like you said, stepping out there with one of your soldiers, and you're the PL, you're the platoon leader, you're in charge of that platoon, and you stepped out there and you rolled with a soldier and he balled you into a pretzel. And, the respect that platoon probably had, man, my PL stepped out there and rolled with, this dude right here who's a freaking BJJ, phenom. And yeah, he got balled up, but the respect they're going to have for you. And I feel like, especially combatives, a lot of leaders would not do that. A lot of PLs, platoon sergeants, senior NCOs, officers would never, ever allow a PFC to get one up on them, or a private to get one up on them. But it shows that you saw the bigger picture. Like my platoon is going to understand that, hey, I'll be in the trenches with you. Win, lose, or draw, I'll be in there. And I think that's something that I like to really impart on as many people as I can, in uniform, out of uniform, about the importance of combatives outside of the obvious. Let's make sure that we're ready to go. We can tussle with the enemy and all that. Just what it does for leaders, and it brings everyone down kind of like to even ground. It doesn't matter what your rank is. Combatives is like ultimate equalizer. And, when you get out there and you're tussling with a PFC with some jiu-jitsu experience.
Well, I would love to say, yeah, that my idea, that was my lofty goal. No, I just didn't want to get punked. I was like, all right, this kid thinks he can go, let's go, right? I'm a competitor. And, the NCOs are there. So I appreciate that in hindsight, they may have respected me. But when I was on the ground within a minute, they were all laughing. And, the LT, man, you think you're so big and so strong. You just got taken down by 19-year-old kid that weighs 150 pounds, but that was great for camaraderie too. But you're right. We used to talk about the FIBA, the forward edge of the battle area, right? Like that was like linear battlefields that we no longer see. Now we're clearing rooms and there is no rear echelon anymore, right? We're fighting in cities and that's where there's a lot more likelihood of hand-to-hand combat. And that means anybody, I don't care whether you're in the finance corps, you may be subject to a situation where you're going to have to know combatives in order to survive.
Well, you look at our near peer adversaries, right? You look at Russia. Look at Russia, right? A lot of those young Russians are doing sambo, combat sambo. They wear shorts and a gi top, so something you can grab a hold of, similarly to what you wear in combat, where you have your fatigue top on, you have your plate carrier on. So they're used to it at a very young age, either wrestling or doing sambo. And you better believe that their military is doing the same thing. So you look at a near peer adversary, we could potentially, God forbid it happens, but could potentially go to war with, and you may have to get to a situation where you're an American soldier and you're fighting someone who's been doing sambo since they were 4 years old. You better have the requisite skills to survive, because you may not be able to thrive in that situation, but survival, there's something to be said about that. When I teach self-defense, I don't give people delusions of grandeur. I'm going to teach you something in a weekend that you're going to survive or you're going to thrive in a situation. No, I'm hoping that you can survive if it happens, but I'm not naive to the fact that the odds aren't in your favor if you don't train this full time. You don't train this, regularly. It's a perishable skill, just like shooting, just like land navigation, whatever that may be. So when I'm teaching combatives, I'm thinking of who'd be the worst opponent for us? What country, what terrorist faction would be the worst, possible enemy for us? I want us to get to a level where we can fight individuals that have been doing different martial arts around the world since they were little kids, living in squalor, just doing this martial art. It's what they eat, sleep, and breathe for. Now they're serving in the military or serving, God forbid, for the enemy. And now we have to fight those individuals. We better be ready for that. And that's why I think combatives is so important in our services. Again, take away all of my tools, take away all my technology, everything at my disposal. What am I left with? My chassis. Am I physically, mentally, emotionally strong? I don't know. Am I, do I have the requisite hand-to-hand skills to fight? And then do I have the hand-to-hand skills to fight long enough to get back to my tools, get back to that technology, back to that radio, get back to my RTO to call for support? So that is why I think combatives, that's part of your chassis. It's what you're building off of. It's no different than doing PT every single day. It's no different than staying physically fit, emotionally fit, smart, not drinking, doing the right things, how we're fueling our body, all these things. I mean, we're combat athletes. People don't like to hear that term, but we are. We're combat athletes. Difference is we don't make millions of dollars doing it. But the difference is worst case scenario for them, they lose on the basketball court or football field. Worst case scenario for us, we die. We don't come home to our families. So why not train yourself like you are that LeBron James, or you are, whoever on a football field or baseball diamond or a professional fighter? That's how we should train as soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, Space Force. I don't care what service you're in. That's how you should train day in and day out. And that's basic discipline you should have within yourself and not be told to do it.
Yeah, because you have to have that tough conversation with the soldiers that second place in combat is death. You're going in there not overconfident, but overprepared.
I think the way it's so much different too. I think some of the fighters truly believe that this is life or death. We're fighting in a cage. Man, the worst case scenario in the cage or on the jiu-jitsu mat or wrestling mat, worst case scenario, I wake up single legging the referee because I got knocked out or choked out. I take a little nap from getting choked out. And I think that is something that's stuck with me, that's the reality of it. I'm not going to die in the cage. I'm not going to die on the wrestling mat or jiu-jitsu mat. And when I hear people draw comparisons, of fighting in the cage to what our men and women do overseas day in and day out on behalf of this nation, there is no comparison. And I've caught flack for this. When I won the Ultimate Fighter, one of the first things I caught flack for, two things I said. I said, two things I said. The first thing I said was profess my love for my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I caught a lot of flack for that. And then I said, what we do inside this cage, this octagon, is easy. What the men and women do overseas, my brothers and sisters in arms, that's hard. This is easy, that's hard. And I caught so much flack for that, for a long time. People still probably talk about it in a negative light, but it's the truth, though. I don't care what anybody thinks. These athletes at the highest levels of the UFC, MLB, NHL, NFL, to me, it doesn't hold a candle to what the men and women do day in and day out overseas. And I'm not talking about myself. This isn't like me gloating about myself. This is about the men and women that I've been blessed to serve with and lead. I mean, the most remarkable human beings on earth, the most selfless human beings on earth are in the United States military. Still, I don't care what the news says or what newspapers say or anything like that. It's still the truth. And I just pray that it remains the truth and it remains to be the institution that I've given my entire adult life to. And again, I'm happy to serve because of those individuals.
Absolutely. And you make a great point that when you step into a cage, the fight is coming. For those of us deployed, we never know. And it might be the person on a convoy who had no idea and they hit an IED. So every day there is real risk, whether we're expecting it or not, which is a lot different than a competition when we know what's coming. And so there's a different amount of preparedness that's required, a different amount of guts, because you don't just have to have those guts for the time you're going to be in that ring competing. You've got to have it for the entire deployment. And then you've got to have the guts to come back and probably deploy again and again. Right? And that's just some intestinal fortitude that you'll never see if you've never joined the military. Now, the other part is this. You raised your hand to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. You protect our First Amendment right that protects religious freedom. If anybody should be able to speak out about their religious beliefs, it should be you.
Yeah, yeah.
When I say you, I mean the American military, those of us who have defended freedom, those of us who swore a sacred oath to uphold a solemn oath to uphold those constitutional rights. So that always bothers me, especially when I see a soldier who wants to proclaim their religion, whatever it is. Hey, they earned that right, and we need to respect that because they're protecting all of our rights for religious freedom. So good for you. It's important too. I think that when we set the example for young children too, that faith is important. And unfortunately, with social media, everything else, we sometimes blow by that. Whatever that faith is, it's important because it goes back to our values. And if we grow up in a household with values, when we come to the military that has values, it's a lot easier to adapt and to understand the military culture. That being said, I want to take you to the after action review. 3 examples of great leadership and 3 examples of horrible leadership. You don't have to name names, but I'd love to hear it.
Ooh, 3 examples of great leadership. I will say this. It took me a while to realize this. I didn't have the best leaders when I first got in the Army. I felt like for a long time, I was a little scorned about the leaders that I was given, some of the leaders I had, whether they were like, most of them honestly were at a higher echelon. And I didn't think they were very good leaders. And I was young, I was naive. There's things that I've looked at now, like, okay, I understand where they were coming from now. It took some time. But man, I had some leaders that there was times where I was like, man, is Ashton Kutcher going to come out? Am I getting punked? Like, are these my leaders? And I did learn, I will say this on a broad spectrum. I know you asked for 3 and 3, but I will say this about the worst leaders I've had and examples of that. Something that resonated with me. I had a very good leader and a very good platoon sergeant of mine at the time. Someone I really looked up to. I had a lot of issues with my first sergeant at the time. He was not a very good leader. Just to paint a picture. He's an infantryman of probably 20 years, and he shoots himself in the hand on deployment with his M9, with his service pistol. And it just was kind of I don't want to say icing on the cake for this guy, but he just was not a good leader. Morally, ethically, was not the kind of person you wanted to look up to as a young leader. I was a young team leader, fire team leader at the time in Iraq, and looking up to this individual wasn't going to happen. But my platoon sergeant gave me some wisdom that has carried with me forever. And it's the most simple thing he said to me. He said, Colton, or Sergeant Smith or Corporal Smith, whatever it was, when you see somebody like that, and he looked over at the first sergeant, this is before he shot himself too, by the way. When you see someone like that, sometimes it's just, you can learn from them because you don't want to be that person. So just do a 180 from what they do and you'll be successful. And it's just such a basic thing to say. But it literally, a light bulb went off in my head. And from that point forward, I realized there's people in our lives, people in our day-to-day lives that we're not going to get along with, whether they're leaders in the military. I don't care if it's going through a drive-through, customer service representative that's not very, not being friendly, whatever it is. But I feel like you can learn from every single person you come in contact with. And worst case scenario, you just do a 180 from whatever they do, and you'll be successful if they're not a very good person. And this first one I had, he's 1, 2, and 3 of bad leaders. He's that kind of leader that. Yeah. So the second, when someone brings up bad leader, I think of that individual. And I won't say his name. Now when you talk about leaders, a leader of consequence, a leader that will stand up, even when it may not be popular. I was very blessed in my career. At a certain point, I was able to work directly for the senior listed advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who, for a lot of people, don't understand that position, but it's the highest ranking enlisted member of the Department of Defense. There's only been 5 of them, I believe. And he was the 3rd SEAC. His name's Command Sergeant Major John Wayne Troxel. The term SEAC is actually its own rank now, too, as well, in all services. If they achieve that rank, you're a SEAC now. So SEAC retired John Wayne Troxel, and I was able to work directly for him. When I was in Afghanistan, previous to that, I was in Afghanistan as a platoon sergeant, first sergeant, and he came over with the chairman to come speak with us after an operation, and he offered me basically as my broadening assignment. He said, "Hey, what's next for you?" I said, "Well, I probably got to leave Force Com. Probably not going to be able to, just go to another Force Com unit to deploy, whatever it may be. So I'll probably have to go be an RI. I'll probably go be, at the time I was a senior sergeant first class, first sergeant, whatever at the time. I was like, probably got to do my RI time." And he said, "Okay." He said, "What about you come work for me?" And I'm like, "What does that look like?" And he's like, "Well, you're going to travel the world, 255 days out of the year for 2 years. And it's going to be like drinking from a fire hose. And we're basically General Mattis's, SecDef Mattis's 10,000 mile screwdriver." And so I said, "That's fine. I'll take it." 3 months after that deployment, I found myself at the Pentagon, and I traveled the world for about 18 months with him. And you want to talk about a leader that I was able to just soak in everything that he had done for, 35, 36 years of service. He jumped into Panama as a staff sergeant just to paint a picture of how long he served. Jumped into Panama as a staff sergeant, fought in every theater of combat since then. He's retired now, obviously, but being able to be a fly on the wall with John Wayne Troxel, larger in life. I learned so much from him, being his right-hand man, if you will, for those 18 months. And man, there's 100 things that he taught me throughout that time and still teaching me. We're still very, very connected. So I think of more people that have made an impact on me, and most recently it'd be John Wayne Troxel. Before I took the leap of faith to move over to where I am now, I was with him for about 18 months, traveling the world. That was invaluable. That time that I had learning from somebody like that literally, you talk about selfless service. When you serve over 30 years, there's nothing selfish about that. You're giving your life to this profession of arms. And that's what he does. And that's what he epitomizes. And I think of being dedicated to something so much that's larger than myself. And that's probably the biggest lesson he taught me was selflessness. And I don't know if I have that in me to serve 35 years. But I look at guys like him, and I was subjected to great leaders at an elite level of special operations and of the strategic level during that time. And it really changed my mindset of those guys at the top. You think of sometimes like, oh, what are those guys in the Pentagon know? They don't know the real struggle, So I know you asked for 3 examples, but it's hard for me not to give personal testimony of people that made an impact on me. And John Wayne is one of those people.
Well, and you're right. It's tough to surpass what he's done. He was a soldier, made a big difference. But in one way that you can, he says, hey, if you're out of weapons, use your E-tool. And you're saying, no, use your hands. So you're going one tougher than him. So E-tool is better to swing than the bare hand, or at least, it's a weapon. So E-tool Nation.
That's right.
That being said, the other thing that rubbed off on you that I can tell that you may not know, you have, like John, you have a clothing company and a gym. You're already setting up for your transition. And that's what John Wayne Troxel did with E-Tool Nation. And I think as warriors, we must always be prepared for what's coming next. We will have all of your awards and accolades in the show notes if people want to check you out. But if people want to learn more about you, where can they go, Colton?
Instagram, Facebook, online. You can Google me. But yeah, Instagram, Facebook, Colton Smith MMA. Both sites I do monitor as much as I can when I'm on there. And anybody can come to any of my gyms. So we have 2 gyms in Maryland, 1 gym in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and about to open up a couple in North Carolina and possibly 1 in Texas. So Enlisted 9 Fight Company, martial arts gym. We also have functional fitness there, fitness instructors, fight gym. So come on out and learn how to make your hands lethal.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today on Veteran Led, where we pursue our mission of promoting veteran leadership in business, strengthening the veteran community, and getting veterans all of the benefits that they earn. If you know a leader who should be on the Veteran Led podcast, report to our online community by searching @Veteran Led on your favorite social channels and posting in the comments. We want to hear how your military challenges prepared you to lead your industry or community, and we will let the world know. And of course, hit subscribe and join me next time on Veteran Led.